Okay, we're back. It is COMP305. That's Game Programming 1, Winter 2016 semester, and it's week 11, part 2 of our broadcast. Last day, we were talking about how to create a menu, which is one of your requirements for Friday, really, at the end of the day, right? Your requirement is to get together, if you look at your details of your project, right? So if I was to look at that for a second, hold on a second. Let's take a look at your final project details. It says it on your Dropbox as well. So one of the things it says is, and this isn't it. What am I looking at? Not COMP307. See, my mind is at the end of the day like this. Like I'm sure for you guys as well, gets a little tired, right? So let's try this out again. It means that by you should have your menu scene running, right? So your menu scene and your first draft of your external document is due this Friday, right? Week 11 by midnight, right? Which means you have to have your menu working. You should pick your menu. Please don't use my assets. I'm telling you in advance. I'm giving you an example of how to make a thing. I don't want any of my assets used ever. So if I look at it in assignment 3 and I see my assets, assignment 2 and I see my assets, assignment 1, here my assets, anything like that, you will lose marks. Just letting you know. I don't want any of my assets are examples of work that you could do. They're not for you to use. You use your own assets or get them from somewhere else, okay? So please know that. I've said that a bunch of times. I'm saying it again, right? So the menu scene I made for you guys yesterday, or I think it was, yesterday, is an example of how to do a menu scene, and it didn't take me very long. Like, I mean, it was a very basic, some basic buttons and some basic stuff. You could download some beautiful things, which I'll show you today where to get them from, right from Unity, and that's okay to use, right? If you can make that work, that's okay. But please don't use my assets. My assets are just examples, and I look at it and I'm like, it makes me cringe. I'm like, oh my God, they used the ugliest assets, my assets, to give you examples of how to work, right? So you know, I would ask you not to do that. Okay, so let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. So if I go to Unity, for example, and I'll please pull up your Unity so you can do this with me. I'm going to go back to that menu example, okay? And we're going to make another menu really quickly, menu demo, right? Here's my menu. Remember, this is what we did last day, right? And when I run the menu right now, I have a very simple menu that comes up eventually. Here it is. I hover over, and then whatever, this is what it looks like. If I click on the instruction screen, it goes to instruction screen. Right here it is. And if I go back to menu, it goes back to menu. Very simple, right? Okay. But I want another menu, and let's make another scene for that. So I'm going to go to scenes, and we'll add a new scene. We'll call it demo, right? Because that's what we're going to download some stuff from the Unity Asset Store here, right? So I'm going to go to create new scene, and we'll call it the demo scene, right? Here it is. And inside my demo scene, I want to download these assets. All right. So where do I get them from? First of all, if I go to assets and if I go to import package, it's not where you get them from. Okay, this is not where you get them from. You got to go to your window asset store, right? If you go to asset store, and there's also a download manager that you can access, right? So if I go to my asset store, it's one thing, but there's actually a window that's not being able to see here where you can download, you can manage your downloads, right? So you can download stuff again. Like if you've already downloaded something, you don't have to go to asset manager to download it again. It actually has them, it's built into your system after this, right? So an example of this would be if I import my assets or whatever, like, you know, if I go re-import all, it's one thing. But if I go import package, right, and if I go to custom package, I can point to a package that I've got, right, wherever my packages are. Notice that anything I've downloaded, not here. However, if I was to go into the asset store, I've already downloaded it. Let me show you this, right? So go to asset store. And let's say I look for, I'm going to look for Unity technology stuff, right? Because that's the free stuff. So I'm going to scroll down here. And under free, there's two sections here, top free, right? There's one from, let's say, standard assets. If I go there and look, this is some standard assets. This is actually the same assets you can download. Notice that there's something that says update, right? I've already downloaded these standard assets, and in order for me to update things, like it gives you things like the character, the aircraft controller, and so on, I can certainly do this. I can click update, and it'll update my local assets, right? This is sometimes what you'll get, even if you've already downloaded an asset, right? But notice when I go here, there's a little button up here. See, it says Download Manager. This is important to see this, because then it'll show you all the assets you've ever downloaded, right? And it'll show if they have an update or not for them, and so on, right? So please don't try and re-download assets. That's just a waste of time. This will update like this. If you can see, if I go to an asset that I've already downloaded, it'll be there. It'll decrypt the package, and then it'll ask if I want to import it or not, right? Now, this is for my standard assets, the stuff that I get here in Unity, right? They exist somewhere. It's not like you're downloading them from space, right? It's not like that. It says importing complete project, you know, whatever. Do I want to do that? I can click import, and then it'll download the whole thing. I'm going to say cancel here. I'm going to go to my download manager, and it'll show me all the assets that I've already downloaded at one time, right? So things like, I don't know, dungeon level kit. There's one I had, and it can show you the ones that are updated. Here's an update, right? Quick Path and Rain AI and other things that I was playing around with, right? Simple cloud system and whatever. One of the ones that's in here that if and again, look at this one, survival shooter deprecated. Tells you don't use it, right? Terrain assets and Unity samples. Here's the one I want you to look at. There's something called Unity samples UI, right? And you can look at it from Unity Technology. So if I click on there, it looks like this, Unity samples UI, okay? Now notice that there's a very interesting way of doing a menu, right? Now this is totally cool. You can import these ones. If I click import, it'll bring up the package. Notice that there's a bunch of stuff here that it'll try and download, right? And it'll tell you, like if you look at animation, fonts, materials, models, prefabs, all these things, it'll try and put into my assets, all these things, right? Caution, all right, caution. Notice that I already have a prefabs folder. It'll take this prefabs folder and import whatever's in there inside there as well. Inside this prefabs folder that I'm trying to get, it'll have a button. Notice how it sees my prefabs. My panel, camera, and button are already there. And it's going to try and put them in the same spot, right? So this is a challenge, right? Just letting you know, this particular package doesn't put it into standard assets. It just imports it into your view. And it's your job to move them away and put them into like an imported assets folder, right? So before I do this, well, actually, it doesn't matter. I'll import everything. So I'll import. Just watch my assets grow. And then I have to, you know, kind of split these off a little bit because they're not mine, okay? Let's take a look at this. So I want to make a new folder here, right? In my assets, I want to make a new folder called imported assets because they're not mine, right? They're someone else's assets. And I can see that animation and button and fonts and all this stuff for sure. That's going to go in imported assets. And the same thing goes with you know, anything else that I haven't added, like models. I didn't add these models in there, right? So let's go back up one. So go back up to assets. So models, prefabs I did. Scenes and scripts, I have my own scenes and scripts. So scenes and scripts, those definitely can go into imported assets. Textures and sprites, that's going to go into imported assets for sure. So where did it go? Undo. 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 Oh, there it is, under levels. So it really should go into imported assets. There we go. And anything else, if you notice, like if I've got anything else, materials, slider background, slider fill, slider knob, you know, all this stuff here. I never put in materials, so again, that would be something that I want to move over to imported assets. I don't have that. Models, again, this whole models folder definitely goes. So I didn't make any models. Where you got to be careful is prefabs, and I have prefabs here. I'm gonna put my models in my imported assets here, and textures. Textures I have. These are my textures. Remember I made these. And prefabs, there's a bunch of extra prefabs. So what I want to do is go into imported assets and make a new prefabs folder. So prefabs. Oh, that's not what I wanted. I want to make a new folder, prefabs. There we go. And what I want to do in my prefabs, the ones that I have in my prefabs here, I'm going to grab the ones that aren't mine. So I made button, camera, and panel. All the ones that say SF, I want to take these ones and then kind of pull them into the prefabs folder that are in import assets. So now I'm back to normal again. This is what you should see. All right. Why did I do all this? Because organization is important, ladies and gents. And if you don't do this properly, what's going to happen is I'll kill that window too. When you don't do this, then you mix up your assets. And remember, the stuff that gets built are the stuff that's in your scenes, right? So if you have lots of scenes and your scenes have a lot of assets that are being referenced, and there's a lot of prefabs, it'll try and put in every single prefab that's in your prefabs folder. It'll load that into your build, right? And that's bad. If you have like 1,000 prefabs or something crazy, it'll put them all in your builds. Take them out. Put them in inside another one. Don't make it so that it's part of the instead of the generic prefabs folder because it looks in there. Okay, so I've got a bunch of imported assets and I want to make a scene up, right? Notice that I have in my prefabs imported assets, I have a button and I have a panel and so on. I have some other built-in things in here, right? I also have some built-in scenes, like some scenes that have been imported, right? So let's try some of these scenes out, right? So I can try them out. This is imported assets. So let's look at menu 3D. Let's double click on the scene. All right, so here's my menu 3D. I'm looking at a 2D. Let's focus in on the 3D version. So I'm going to go into my scene F elements, right? Here's my 3D version just for a second. And I'm just going to rotate it so I see it in the scene. This is what it looks like. Let's go back to 2D. And I'll zoom in here. So this is what the scene is going to look like. When I play the demo, all right, this particular scene looks like this, right? So it's a built-in thing. Now you can customize these buttons because, again, you have the control of going in there and changing the assets and the images and all that. But notice that it's got some built-in functionality. New game, settings, we'll bring another menu in there. Video, bring in some video selection with knobs and stuff like this. It's all built in. Guys, and this is just one free little UI thing that you can grab from the asset store. There are a ton of UI stuff, you know, like little examples from UI, and it's good to learn from them too. Like if you want to understand how this is working, when I hover over, right? When I do this hover situation, it's actually responding to what I'm doing. And actually, it tilts, as I move down here and up there, it's, you know, a true 3D menu kind of thing, right? All right, that's one. There's also other things, like that's menu 3D. There's other scenes here, controls. Let's look at the controls one. So here's the controls one. If I play the scene, it shows you there's some controls, right? Some toggle A, B options, right? So it gives you a control view, almost like a little, this is a nice idea of how they do an instructions view, with a little scroll view here, and it tells you how to, you know, put things together. It shows you the canvas, and it shows you panels and text and the toggle. It gives you good examples of how to make things, put things together, if you want to have more of an example of how to make things work, with some good assets, actually. Here's drag and drop. It's another scene. So let's play this one. So how do you drag and drop? So drag from here to drop area 1 or 2, one of those, or one of these, and you can see how, you know, it responds to these kind of things. So drag and drop kind of menus. You have this little background scene in the background. This is SF scene elements, where you have your background that's moving, and there's a bit of a sprite, an animated sprite probably in the background, right? There's also a particle system going on, right? Okay, that's fine. Let's take a look at other ones. Lighting. There's lighting. And I mean, you can play with this on your own, but you can see how, let's maximize on play this time. You can see how if you had a menu system like this, that you could change the, you know, you can create your own interfaces, very simple interfaces here with this one, okay? Now, again, these are all examples of work. Notice how there's a watermark that's Unity in the bottom right-hand corner. You're not going to use this in a real game, right? For our purposes, though, I mean, this isn't such a bad thing to learn from. And there's a lot of other ones that are free in the asset store. So it's okay to use those ones, right? Again, the only thing I'd ask you not to do, I mean, if you want to get really fancy, some people like to use the whole package. It's like they're downloading the whole game. Please don't do that. Please don't download your game from the asset store. That would be really bad too, right? That would be just wrong, right? You can download assets like sounds. You can download, you know, animations, those kind of things, characters, prefabs, you know, this kind of stuff, menu, UI stuff. Those things are okay. Scripts, stay away from scripts. I've asked you to do that on your own. You should be able to do your own script on the stuff you download. And you have examples, because when you download stuff like this stuff has scripts all built into it. So, I mean, if I wanted to know how something was working, you know, I can certainly look at the scripts. There's a ton of them that they include, right? Script examples in my imported assets. So let's look at scripts. So a bunch of scripts here. Here's my, active state toggler, change color, drag me, drag panel, drop me, resize panel, to do all kinds of scripts. And you can learn from these things just by looking at some of this. Like, for example, if I wanted to do some kind of, change color panel, they give you an example here of how to do the colors, what classes you're gonna modify, and so on, to change the color of certain things. And they're not that big, right? Like, you're looking at the material color. You're changing the material color. That's really what you're doing when it comes to that particular renderer. And this is a great way of making the same enemy have different colors. So if you're making a multiplayer game, you make a ship, and then you make an enemy have a material color for one is green, another one is red, green-red idea. You can do that with material color, right? So again, there's some really good examples on how to do stuff with script. Please don't steal scripts from other people though. Like, use them when use the pieces that you need, not all of them. In other words, don't steal wholesale, right? Okay. Questions about UI. So really, I mean, UI is pretty simple. You make a button, you have some text, you make a response to the button, some kind of click listener or whatever, and then it does something for you. Okay, that's really what it's about. And UIs can be inside your game itself. It doesn't have to be like, just on the menu. Like, you can have actual buttons on your game that you click on as well. So you can create a canvas, different sizes, an overlay, and with buttons that are on the bottom of your screen, so that you can actually do stuff with the buttons on your screen, like if you want to do something, right? Or let's say, for example, you want to bring in a canvas that's hidden on a press. Like, example would be some kind of instruction screen, or let's say you have an inventory. You want to bring up your inventory list, right? The character inventory. Maybe he has a sword or a shield or something, and you want to show his inventory. That could be a menu, right? And all you're doing is you use code to show images in your inventory. But you're turning off and turning on images that are inside your menu. That's all it is, right? And the whole menu could be hidden. It can be disabled. And then when you turn your inventory on, you press the I button for inventory, bam, your inventory gets, as there's an overlay on top of your screen, right? So lots of stuff can happen here, and it's not that difficult to do. Okay, but today we're talking about mini-maps, right? We want to talk about mini-maps. And that's not that difficult to do either. So let's start a new project. For this one, I'm going to start a new project here. We're going to make it a 3D project, and we're going to call it COMP305 Winter 2016 Minimap, right? We'll create this project. Yeah, I don't care about the scenes being modified. Don't save anything. Yay. So minimap, why am I showing you the minimap? Because it's a nice little thing that you can add a little bit more interest to the game, especially if you're making a 3D game or even a 2D platformer. Sometimes the level's really long and you don't know where you are. Or you want to help the player to find their way around the level. And you want to kind of give them a bird's eye view of where they are in the game. Now there's a few steps here to take. So first of all, we need some examples. And for this one, I'm going to add in some standard assets. Okay, so let's show you the standard assets that we've got in here as we had before. So I'm going to go to Assets. I'm going to import package, right? And I'm going to go into prototyping. Let's add the prototyping piece. So there's my prototype package. I'm going to add that in. Again, remember, this is under standard assets. Once I finish doing this, then I'll send everything from standard assets into this _ standard assets or imported assets folder, right? But for now, let's leave it as is. So I've got more to download, okay? Let's get the next one. So I'm going to go to Assets, Import Package, and I'm going to go Characters, right? All right, great. So I've got my characters, and I'll import them all too. Why not? Okay, so I've got this big standard assets folder, and I've got this thing that says Editor. And when it's done importing all these assets, lots of them, even for these standard assets, it's like tons and tons. If you look at the standard assets now, there's quite a few of them. Character, cross-platform input, physics, materials, all kinds of stuff that comes with these assets. Again, I don't want them here under standard assets. I want them above. By the way, there's also a section called Editor. What's this? Does anyone know what the editor is? If I put like an editor folder in it? It's very important. Whatever you do not rename this folder, move this folder, or anything else if you import assets. Because this folder makes changes to your inspector and your actual Unity interface. Okay, so you can customize your Unity interface as well as everything else by making some scripts that are attached to the editor, right? But you need to put them in the editor folder in order for you to do that. So please, please, please do not move this, okay? Notice how it actually adds in some other things here, like mobile input. And that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for this folder and the scripts that are inside of here, right? And if you look at these scripts for your input, you know, notice before that you would have for a regular script, it extends mono-develop, but not so with this. The namespace for this one is Unity Standard Assets Cross-Platform Import .inspector, right? And the class is a custom class called Cross-Platform Initialize, right? So it actually adds in or tries to modify the scripts that are part of your, that make up your UI. So please don't modify this one. But for this one, you can rename this one, example, imported assets, just so that you know that they're not yours. Okay, cool. So that when it re-imports everything or moves things around, it'll be there. Let's add the rest of my stuff in as normal. So I'm going to put in some stuff. One folder for sure is going to be prefabs for this one. And maybe some other things like materials. These are typical things. And maybe some textures. So we need those too as well. So textures. That's it. And maybe some scenes and scripts. That would be good too, eh, Tom? How about those ones? Scenes underscore scenes. I like to put underscores there so that they're at the top so I can access them. And scripts. Scenes, let's save our scene. So file, save as, save scene as. And let's move it into the scenes folder. So into the scenes folder, we'll call this main. Let's actually call it main instead of name. I'm silly. Okay. Okay, save the project, save the scene. So you're ready to go. I want to set up a some basic things. I'm going to go into imported assets here, and I'm going to grab some under prototyping, the prototyping folder. I'm going to go into prefabs, and you notice there's a ton of prefabs in this one, right? Tons. There's a block and different things. What I want you to get is the some kind of floor. There's a floor prototype. I want to get the 64 by 64 by 1 floor and just drag it into my scene, which is a kind of a neat little floor that looks like this. All right, so it's got a collider already built into it. It's ready to go. I'm also going to grab a standard character controller in here, right? And there's a couple you can grab, eh? Like if you look at the characters, notice there's first-person character, and under prefabs, I have 2. I have a rigid body first-person controller, right? Rigid body first-person controller with a capsule collider built in, right? This is the stand. This is actually the old school way of doing it, and also an FPS controller with the first-person controller script built in. If I take I'm not sure if you've tried this one, but let's try and take this one here, rigid body first-person controller, and drag and drop this thing into the scene to see what I get. There we go. Let's see what I get now when I play. If I play the game just with these things, all I have here is the directional light, main camera, my floor prototype 64 by 01 by 64, and my rigid body first-person controller. Press play. All right, there we go. I got my first-person controller. Notice that I don't have any footsteps on this one, but I'm able to move around the scene and jump and do the regular things that I can do, right? In the actual scene, and let's just undo this, I'm going to split this up for a second into two little panels. So we've got my scene and we've got my game. I'm going to put my game down here for now, inside this panel, so I can see what my game looks like when I play, but I want to also see what my scene looks like. And if I focus in on my rigid body first-person controller, so I'm going to focus in on there, notice that there is an object here that you can see, right? That is it looks like a capsule, right? Now, either one will do, whether you use a first-person controller, rigid body first-person controller, or the other one, first-person controller, the regular one, both fine. Let me use the other one to show you the difference, right? So pull this one in. And now I notice that the positions are all wacky, so let's put them back to normal, reset them, right? And now we have to get rid of our main camera because we have two cameras. We don't need them. And if I press play, I get that footstep stuff again, right? So, and a head bob. Notice that it's not just the footsteps, but I also get kind of like this head bob that goes up and down. The camera actually moves up and down. That's the one we've been using all along, okay? Both are fine. So you can still get the same sounds. All that stuff works, and you see this plane that wanders around. Okay, I want to know where on the plane my character is, and I want to be able to do that in a little mini-map, right? So let's go back to first-person controller and go F to find him, right? And I'm going to use the Alt on Windows or Option on Mac to rotate this stuff so that he's, first of all, he's half sunk into the screen, which is bad, right? I don't want to make that happen. I want to raise him out of the ground a little bit. There we go. So that is at least his capsule collider is outside of the ground. That would be bad if it was just like that. I'd rather have him fall than be stuck, right? That would be really bad. And I mean, you can see the capsule collider. You can also see some other stuff going on here to make the character function. Okay. I want to be able to create a mini-map to see my character. If I made a mini-map right now and I look from the top down, can I see my character? The answer is no, because the character doesn't have any distinguishing marks. There's nothing that shows me the character is just empty. It's invisible, right? So one of the first things I need to do for the mini-map is create some kind of panel or image so I can see my guy or my girl, right? And a good one for that one is a quad, right? That's not a pretty good one to use, right? You can also use a sprite, one of the two. Doesn't really matter which one. Okay, let's rename this stuff. So this will be called player. And this one here will be called player cam. My player camera, okay? Just to differentiate that, I'll just tag this as a player just for, to be nice, right? And we'll make this the ground. We'll just rename this thing ground. So you can see the difference between one and the other. So they're not standard prefabs, and later on we may add them to our own prefabs to make our scene up. Okay, so pretty cool. We've got our ground, we've got our player, but we don't have anything in here. I want to add a new item, and if I look at the 2D object, I can see sprite as an option. Okay, sprite is a pretty good option for this one. If I add it in, right, and if notice how the 2D sprite, where is it? How come I can't see my 2D sprite? And if I kind of zoom in here to see it, if I go F to see my 2D sprite, and I zoom in, where is it? How come I can't see it, right? Well, is it here? And here's some kind of annoying stuff too, guys? Look at this. I've got this gizmo here for the light, and I've got my gizmo for the camera, and it's kind of starting to piss me off, right? So I want to get rid of my gizmos. So I don't want to see any 3D icons. Let's get rid of those, right? I can also take away the grid if I don't like the grid, right? Because that's kind of annoying as well. Because I've already got a grid here for building things. By the way, you can show under gizmos, you can show and hide whatever you want. You can also raise and lower the sizes of them. So if I go back to 3D gizmos, I can make them bigger or smaller, right? So that they're not as annoying, right? If I really do want to see them, right? And you can also turn off and turn on other certain things, whatever you want to look at, terrain and so on. You could choose to just, not show one thing or the other thing. All right. So gizmos, I just made them really, really small. Okay, so now if you look at my actual object, my sprite, I don't have a sprite in there, and I need something, to kind of look at or use, right? Well, luckily we have some stuff in the imported assets that might help us. So if I look at imported assets, I noticed that I have a bunch of different things here, and it's interesting to go look through them all. I have audio for footsteps if I want to use those. That's in the first-person controller. In the rollerball, I have materials for my rollerball, prefab scripts, textures for my rollerball, different things that I have in here as well. Third-person character, I have, again, the same kind of idea. I have some textures for them as well. That's for the actual character. Cross-platform input, right? I also have sprites. Right? This is neat. So I have a built-in sprite that I can use. And I know it's kind of funny, but I want to use something that's built in so I don't have to work too hard, right? Let's use this like double arrow up icon, right? Which is kind of like this button accelerate over whatever it is, right? That's something you can use. You can use anything right now just to kind of show this off. Now, if I take this sprite, right, and if I was to kind of pass it in there, right, you notice how it's pretty massive. Right? Let's take a look and see what that looks like. So, and it's looking like the wrong position. It's kind of looking up, right? I want to make this sprite a lot smaller, and I want it to rotate so we can see what it looks like, right? In the scene. Okay, so, well, how do I rotate this thing? Here's my rotation, and let's look at it this way. So I want to go definitely this way, right? which means -90. So it's kind of looking at it like this. So this is what the actual sprite looks like. It's pretty darn big, right? If I look at my character controller though, and if I focus on him, just to show you the size of how big it is, it's pretty darn wide. It's pretty darn, pretty damn big, right? Now again, if I look at the actual sprite that I used, and if I look on this side, remember the pixels per unit thing? Right now it's 100 pixels per unit. It's pretty darn big. I could change this. If I go to 1, right, 1 pixel per unit, and I click apply, well then it's massive, right? It becomes like huge, like the size of my whole thing, right? So we don't want that. Let's go back to 1. Let's make it 200 and press apply. And let's go focus back in on that sprite, right? So that's not bad, hey? That's actually pretty good for my player. Right? It's flat, though. That's the thing to note. The player sprite is good. Even a little bit better, a little bit bigger would be better. So instead of 200, let's make it something like 250. It doesn't have to be that big. Just want to be the same size or approximately the same size as my collider, right? So you can see what it looks like. So if I look at it from the side and I zoom in, I zoom in here. I don't want to see it so that it's bigger, too much bigger than my collider. And that's probably about right. See, here's my collider. I'm zooming in too fast. But see how it looks like? You can actually see what it looks like. Now this is pretty cool. But what I want to do is, as I look from the top, I'm just rotating this, and I'm going to play the game now, right? I want to see when I play the game what it looks like. I'm not going to maximize on play here, right? Now remember, I'm not seeing anything because my player camera is the thing that's viewing everything. So that's why I'm not seeing anything here. If I click on player camera, I'm not seeing much, right? Because that's what my player camera is looking at. Let's try and play the game and see what I see. Okay, so here's my player camera, and I can see myself. But what's the problem? It's kind of backwards, right? So I got to rotate that too, because I don't want to see this thing. And I'm also rendering this thing, right? This is my mini-map icon, right? Should my regular camera see my mini-map icon ever? The answer is no, right? So I should call it. I should not include it, which means I got to make it into another layer than what it is right now, okay? Because right now when I'm going, if I run, right, it's kind of looking weird, right? It's kind of like bobbing the thing up and down, and I don't want that to happen. Okay, so that's kind of one. Let's go back to this, and I want to rotate this on a different plane. So I want to rotate this way, right? Oh, undo. I meant to do the sprite, right? So let me zoom in there a little bit more. So I want to rotate it across the y-axis, right? Again, approximately, 180 degrees, minus 180, let's say. Actually, it doesn't matter with 180 or 180. Same. All right, now so that's the first thing. I want to play it to make sure this thing is correct, right? And now it looks like we're going in the right direction, right? Yay. Okay. Very, very simple. Okay, I don't want to render this thing, and I'm going to call this thing the player marker, all right? Actually, I'm going to call this marker, right? So I'm going to go to default where it says under my layers. Here's my layers. I'm going to go to default. And then under there, I'm going to go to add layer. And we're going to call this, under my layers, I'm going to put in a new one called marker. Any kind of marker object I don't want to see, right? Okay, cool. I'm going to go back to my new, where it says new sprite. And I'm going to call this the player marker. Player marker. Right, there it is. And I'm going to tag this as a marker. Okay, that's what it is. Marker means this is the mark that I'm using, right? My player camera now, notice that its culling mask is everything. I'm going to change it so it doesn't see the marker. So I'm going to just click on this. So the marker doesn't display anymore. And if I press, oh, the other thing is, a couple things for the marker. Here's my player marker. Notice that my order in layer is 0. This is good, right? If I press play now, right, I won't render myself, but I can see which way I'm pointing. So as I'm walking, I can see that I'm walking back and forth across the scene, right? And I don't see my player marker. That's good. So I've done part one. Part one is I need something so I can, when I look down on my player, I can see the player. If I can't, I mean, otherwise I won't be able to see the player in this way. If I'm using a capsule, some people like to use a capsule as well, where they can look down at the player object and see a capsule like this. But really, when I look down at it, it's going to look very similar to this. Okay? Questions so far? I'm just making a marker. I mean, again, you can choose any sprite you want, right? That makes sense for you. An arrow, triangle, whatever, right? Okay, so that's number one. Second thing is I need to add a UI system because the minimap is going to float as an overlay on my UI, all right? So I need a canvas, just like what we were looking at before, and that's going to float over everything. Okay, I'm going to bring my game back into the screen now. I don't have to make it separate anymore. There it is, and I'm going to go back to my scene and expand this a little bit so I can see just a little bit more of what I'm seeing right now. So again, I'm going to rotate this. So there's my player, right? Notice here's my player, and he's kind of floating over, and he's got that marker that's sitting there. And that kind of gives us the position. Actually, we could have seen it because the camera itself gives us the position of where the direction of where the player is headed right now. Okay, but I want to add a minimap. How do I do that? So I want to add, not to my player, but on its own, as an example, a new UI image object, right? So if I go to image, it adds in an image to the canvas, right? Here's my image. So if I look on the game, I see this, right? Nice. But the image is square, and it's pretty small. And I want to make this image, and again, I'm looking at the game view for a second. I want to make this image about 150 by about 150. That's probably around the right size. Okay, so that's how big my minimap is going to be. You can make it as big or small as you like, right? I don't know, maybe for our example, I'll make it even bigger so you can see it nicer, 200 by 200. If I make it that big though, the thing that I have to think about is where it's going to be positioned. So I want to make sure I click on my positioning, and I want it to be on the bottom left corner, always in the bottom left corner of my screen. I use this so my UI is responsive, and I click on this bottom left-hand corner, right? So it's responsive to the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. Okay, cool. If I look at here to my scene, I'll go to my scene again. I can't see it. I want to click to 2D for a second, 2D mode. And I want to pull out for a second, and I want to see what my UI looks like. This is what my UI looks like right now, right? So I'm going to just zoom in here so you can see, right? Don't worry about the square, but this is where it is. So if I click on my image, and I click here, I want to bring my image so that's kind of on the bottom left-hand corner of my screen here, right in my UI. So positioning is important, and I don't want to give it some random numbers here. Like it's 135, let's make it 135 by 135 to make it nice and even. So it's proportional, right? It's 200 by 200, 135 by 135. Cool, cool. All right, so I got a place. This is the image that I'm using here. This canvas image is actually my minimap. So let's call this thing, I'm going to rename this thing from image to minimap. This is where it's going to be. This is what this minimap is, right? It's not going to move with the player. It's tied to the canvas. So it's going to hover in front of the player when I play the game. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I play the game now. Right? It's just going to sit there in front of the player. It's not going to move. Right now it's white. It's not the mini-map that I wanted, right? But this is what the idea is the same. It's already working because just like we did our reticule when we did our gun, right? Same thing with this image. It's this big. How do I project my camera to the image? I need another camera, right? Let's add that in. So I'm going to go right-click, and I'm going to create a new camera, right? Second camera. Now the camera right now is perspective. And if I was to look at it, let's go back into 3D mode for a second. You can see what it's looking at, right? So if I look at the camera and I rotate around, you can see that the camera is looking like way over here, right? What I want to do is I want to rotate the camera so it looks down, right? Which means, let me go to my rotation again. I want to rotate it across this axis here so it looks down on my map, right? Now, notice that I'm rotating, and I'm rotating 90 degrees. So my camera is looking straight down 90 degrees towards my character, or towards this area here. But it's way off. Like my position of my camera is like 135 by 135, right? X and Y, from an X and Y perspective. And I want to move it so that I can actually see my plane. See, there's my plane, right? And that's kind of a little better. So there's 0. This is -4. I want to go to 0. So it's kind of 0, 0, 135. 135 is how far back it is, right? And that's nice. I'm seeing a perspective view of my scene, and I can get closer and closer until I see all of my scene in my camera, right? That's what I want to see. So use this as a guide. right? Because this is what your camera is going to be looking at, and it's always going to stay in the same place, right? I could also make it follow the character. If my scene is, if my background graphic is really massive, like I have a huge terrain, but I only want my camera to view part of the terrain, I can do that too. And in order for me to facilitate this, I'm going to kind of zoom in. So instead of 135, let's move it into 50, right? Okay, so, whoa, what is my camera looking at now if I'm looking at 50? Well, let's take a look. So here's my camera, and you notice that from 50, it takes up most of the plane, right? Let's pop it out a little bit so you see what I'm talking about. So as I move it out, you can see how the edges go away, right? And that's fine. I mean, 50 or something like that, or, and again, as I move through, it's about 55. That looks like I'm probably about right, 55. I can see the background. One thing I don't want to see from my camera, this is a special camera, I don't want to see the skybox. So change it from skybox, change it to solid color. And let's make the solid color of anything I don't see with the camera, let's make it some strong background color like blue or even black, right? Okay, cool. So that's my camera. Camera sees this. Now my camera sees everything, right? UI, the marker, the whole thing. So theoretically, when I play, right, and if I start in that area, my camera will see it. I'm not moving along with everything, but let's just take a look and see what I see right now with the camera. All right, so if I press play, right, I still see this. How come? I should see my camera. Well, I'm not telling it where to project. I got to tell my camera to project on something. And notice that my rendering path is one thing. Well, first of all, there's a couple problems. My camera, if I double click, we should rename this thing to minimap camera. All right, so we know the difference between our regular camera that's part of our player and our minimap camera that's looking down on our scene, right? The other thing is I do not need an audio listener, so let's get rid of that. Otherwise, that'll cause a problem, okay? All right, notice that my rendering path is forward and whatever, but there is a special place that says target texture, all right, target texture. Now, if I look at my minimap under my canvas on an image, do I have a texture? No, I have a source image though, and I have a material. 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 If I have a material, right, I can use it, I can put a texture on there, right? So I need to put a minimap material in place and a minimap texture. I need to add those two things in place as well. Let's do that. So in my materials, I'm going to make a new material called minimap. Cool. In my textures, I want to make a new texture. And it's going to be a render texture. So if I look at, you know, the type of textures I can add in, look, there's an option here for render texture. Please select this one, render texture. Let's call this minimap. Cool. Okay, so my minimap, my render texture, and what I want to take is my minimap render texture and go back to my materials here, right? So if I click on my materials, my minimap materials, and if I go back to my textures, I should be able to do one of these. Take my minimap texture, pull it on my material. Well, this is cool and all, right? But this is a standard shader, and I can't have a standard shader. I have to click under UI, right? Unlit, right? Where is it? Lit? No, it was unlit. And unlit, if I look at you know, standard UI, if I go default UI, I'll take a look at both lit and unlit. Unlit is what I want, texture. There we go. So unlit texture. All right. Okay, so now that I've got the minimap texture and I've got my camera, right? And here's the target texture, right? Remember that if I take this minimap and go here like this, right? I mean, that's just the minimap itself. That's the texture itself. So if I press play, do I get what I want? No, I get this white square, right? And this is the challenges that we get into. But if I go to my material, right? The material, and if I drag in this whole material, can it drag in there? No, sir. No, it cannot, right? Because it needs what it needs is a target texture. That's what it's looking at for the camera. The other thing is the depth is really important for my camera depth, right? And sometimes what I want to do is go to -1. It's the same depth as my regular camera. right? Right now I'm using a perspective camera with near and far values as well. If I click in there, notice that I get this white screen. The only way that I'm going to change it is if I go into the texture itself, under textures, and select the proper texture. If the texture is wrong, right, then that's what's not going to have everything work properly, right? So right now it's a render texture, but unfortunately it's rendering inside of material. Here's my material, and in my material itself, because remember, a texture can't live on its own, right? It has to have a material that it's tied to. But I'm using unlit texture. Let's try something else. Let's use unlit UI. And again, let's try transparent. See if that works. It's one of those. Nope. If you believe I forgot. Anyways, but that's the thing we have to do. We have to change the texture so it's the right one, because our camera, right, is going to project somewhere. That's what it's going to be doing, right? Like right now, my culling mask is everything, and my solid color is what I'm using. But that's what I really want to look at. My rendering path, it's going to be looking at this mini-map texture, and it says occlusion color. That's fine. Occlusion culling, by the way, what that means is it's not going to draw anything that's behind other objects. So if I have an object like a cube, and behind the object I have a sphere, and I can't see my sphere because my cube is in front of it, that other object is not being drawn. So it helps with rendering perspective. But that's not really what I want. And why is my mini-map camera not 90 degrees? That's kind of really important. All right. One more time, Tom. Let's keep trying the different textures. And again, this is kind of the some of the stuff we have to do. I remember you have to include, again, a render texture. If it's not a render texture, no matter how much you try, it's not going to work. But the material is the main thing. Notice that the material is not albedo anymore, right? It's this UI unlit or UI lit or whatever it's going to be. If I go UI default, and again, we've tried different things. Right? If I go UI default and press play, right, again, you'll see this white square, right? And what we should be seeing is this mini map thing, this other map, right? This other camera, because you have two cameras in the scene. Just one is generating one view and one is being projected on something else. All right. I know that Francis made it work. One of the guys the back, he kind of made it work, and it was just with the same thing. And today's one of those days where no matter how much I try, I can't remember everything that I want to remember, guys. I'm so sorry. But it's one of these. It's one of these, you know, UI, you know, different kind of shaders. And if you just go down to the right thing, right, if it's not default, if it's lit, as an example, transparent, or unlit transparent, it's one of those that gives you the shader type that you want. And once you have that, you're going to get your mini map walking around. Let's take a short break, and then I'll take a look at my example project so I can remember what the hell I did, and I'll come back and I'll do like part 2 of the part 2. All right, let's do that, and then I'll sit down with you guys. Of course, it's always that way, right? You test it at home, it works fantastic. You test it here, it kicks your ass.